Welcome to the latest PRmoment podcast. And on the show today, we're talking to media lawyer legend Jonathan Coad about what PR folks need to know about the law. Jonathan graduated from Jesus College, Cambridge, with an MA in law, and I think it's fair to say is one of the UK's highest profile media lawyers. His practice areas are copyright, defamation and privacy. His media clients have included Disney, ITV, Sky, Viacom, MTV, Channel 4, Sony, Huffington Post and Newsweek. And he's also undertaken reputation management for corporate clients such as Amazon, Procter & Gamble, Gucci, GlaxoSmithKline and Cambridge University. And he's acted for a whole bunch of high-profile business folks, senior politicians, music, TV, film, and sports stars, I should say, including, I'm told, some members of the royal family. I'm dying to know which ones, but I've no doubt he won't tell us. So in broad terms, he's had 30-odd experience at the intersection of media and the law, and he's going to talk today about what PR practitioners need to know about dealing with the media from a legal perspective. Before we start, two pieces of news from PRmoment. The first is that do check out our program for the PR Masterclass, AI in PR. I won't try and list all the themes here, but it's a fascinating program, one I'm really looking forward to chairing. 10 masterclasses in one day. It's full on but massively informative, so do check out the homepage of PRmoment.com to see more information on that. You can attend virtually or face-to-face, whichever you prefer. And also a quick plug for the final entry deadline for the Creative Moment Awards, which are coming up. They're coming up quite rapidly, actually. On the 20th of June, do check out creativemomentawards.co, creativemomentawards.co, for all the category information that you may need. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
An absolute pleasure. I mean, should we just start with sort of the broad how these things work, the role of a corporate PR firm and the role of a media lawyer in a crisis situation? What's the difference? How do they work in unison? Do they work? Yeah, go on, tell us, just give us a little insight into that battleground when it all kicks off.
Well, going back to let's start with the basics. What is it that a client wants if a PR crisis looms? Now, for reasons which we can go into if you wish, but for legal and regulatory reasons, mainly regulatory, and it's fine to call the podcast what PR and the law, but actually most of my corporate work is to do with the regulation of the media. So what is it a client wants? Well, when a media crisis looms, what they really want is for there not to be a media crisis. So obviously I can't always deliver that, but that's the best outcome, which really only is likely to be achieved by a lawyer for the reasons which we'll go into. If I can't do that, then at least I can reduce it from a Richter scale 9 crisis down to a sort of 3 or a 4. And not only does that matter so far as the actual crisis itself is concerned, but it also means it's less likely that the story will be picked up by the rest of the media, because if it's relatively low profile, dull, not too lurid, who cares? But obviously if it's a Richter scale 9, everybody's going to pick it up.
All right. So when, just moving that question on a bit, I suppose, so what's the best form? What's the best top team for a crisis PR scenario?
Well, for all corporates who are in the public eye, and therefore they're all going to need the work of a PR crisis lawyer and crisis professional sooner or later, that being the nature of the British media, they should have both. And both should be on speed dial ready. I mean, the shortest time I've had to prepare, to take instructions, draft up a letter, send it off to the client, get it approved, get it off to a media entity, this was the BBC, is 20 minutes. Now, sometimes the work needs to be done that quickly. I mean, we all know, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when I started, there was no such thing as the electronic media, and you know, everything was done at a relatively gentle pace. Now, as you know, with the pressure on website journalists to produce, as I understand it, the Mirror journalists are supposed to produce 6 stories an hour. 6 an hour. So you can imagine how little time a PR professional has to react. I mean, the other thing one of the things that's going to repeat in this interview is that the absolute essential, in my view, to do successful crisis PR work, and as you've already told the audience, I've legaled out books, television programs, films, TV, newsprint, magazines, you name it. So I'm fortunate enough to see this from both sides. But the key tools that they need are the key regulations, which is the Independent Press Standards Organisation Code and Ofcom. And less important, but nonetheless as a background, the law of data protection, defamation and privacy. And those are my work tools, and those are the necessary work tools if you're going to be an effective crisis PR practitioner.
Right. Well, hold that thought, folks, because we're going to come on to in a little while about why those elements of regulation are so important. But I just want to look at this story a little bit from the editorial angle, first of all, before we go there. Who are the key decision makers, would you say, editorially, when these contentious issues arise?
I'm so glad you asked me that, Ben. I mean, it's one of the most fun things I've ever done is sitting on the news floor amongst the journalists of a newspaper and legaling out newspaper. It's just the most outrageous fun. It's really, really fast moving. You have to make decisions very, very quickly because, editors want decisions quickly, and you've got your publication time and so on and so forth. One of the key things to understand here is who are the key decision makers when it comes to, as you say, contentious editorial content. And the answer to that is the in-house lawyer. I cannot exaggerate how important the role of the in-house lawyer is. During the course of a week at editorial, there'll be various editorial meetings, always attended by the in-house lawyer. The in-house lawyer is the embedded, integral template mind which makes all the key editorial decisions. Now, obviously, ultimately, they're made by the editor, but 99 times out of 100, the editor will take the advice of the in-house lawyer. They'll just be trusted to say yes or no to a story, or more likely yes or no to bits of a story.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Therefore, the key influence that you need to exercise is over the in-house lawyer. And that's probably, if nothing else is learned from this splendid podcast, that there are a few things more important than that. Those are where the decisions are made.
And basically, they're managing risk, are they? Is that the in-house lawyer?
That's exactly right. They're exactly right, Ben. They're managing risk. I mean, all of these newspapers are commercial entities, and I don't blame them for that. We have a commercial press. People talk about a free press. It isn't really a free press. It's commercial press. So as far as they're concerned, the job of the lawyer could not be more important, because
I think it's a different meaning of the word free. It's not free monetary. It's free speech. But anyway, that's another podcast.
It is free speech, Ben, and it should be free speech. And it's important for your listeners to understand that I've spent all the 30 years that I've been in media defending free speech. I've defended good quality journalism throughout my career. I'm not fighting good quality journalism. I'm fighting bad quality journalism. And the amount of bad quality journalism that we get, to some extent, well, actually to a large extent, depend on how robust we are with tackling it.
Right. But just going back to that risk point a moment.
Yeah.
Because that's really simple for people to understand, right? But vitally important. These decisions are made by an element of risk. What comes into that risk? I mean, there's right or wrong, obviously, but there's a few other bits, aren't there?
Well, I don't want to be over cynical, Ben, but it's not primarily right or wrong. You're right to bring me back to the issue of risk. So it's going back to the two areas of risk. There's regulatory and there's law. Let's take them one by one. Now, most of Fleet Street is regulated by the Independent Press Standards Organisation. The only exceptions are the Guardian, the Independent.
Say that again a little more slowly. Regulated by
all but 3 of the Fleet Street titles are regulated by the Independent Press Standards Organisation, known as IPSO.
Okay.
The three exceptions are the Financial Times, the Guardian, and the FT. But even the Guardian, FT, and the Financial Times effectively self-regulate on the same basis the Independent Press Standards Organisation.
Jonathan, I just want to give you. Do you want to do that bit again? Because the FT and the Financial Times are the same thing, aren't they? Or have I got that wrong?
You're quite right. The FT, the Independent. Right.
Do you want to do that bit again, and I'll re-edit it?
My gratitude and my apology.
Right.
So, all of Fleet Street, via three titles, which is the FT, the Independent, and the Guardian, are regulated by the Independent Press Standards Organisation. And even the FT, the Guardian, and the Independent have a form of self-regulation, which is broadly speaking based on the same system. Now, the most important provision of the IPSO code, we call it IPSO, is this. Paragraph 1.1, newspapers and periodicals must take care not to publish inaccurate or misleading material, including pictures, and must not publish headlines which are not supported by the text. Now, that is imprinted, so you probably gathered, on my brain, because it is central to the work that I do. Now, one of the consequences, going back to managing risk, the consequences to a newspaper not complying with that is the rather uncomfortable process of having to publish a correction or apology. Now, anyone who's dealt with Fleet Street knows they do not like having to concede error. Now, theoretically, the Independent Press Standards Organisation has the power to fine. So far, they haven't, but there is a potential financial risk. Now, going over then to Ofcom, which is all terrestrial broadcast, the Ofcom code, paragraph 7.1 says broadcasters must not treat the subject matter of their programs unfairly. The key word is unfairly, and that is absolutely key to the work when I'm dealing with the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, or whatever, as I do reasonably often. Obviously, not nearly as often as I do with Fleet Street. Now, the thing about Ofcom, two things. One is that they will have to broadcast a correction. Now, I've actually dictated a broadcast correction, which was one of the first read out on Channel 5. You could see the newsreader was not enjoying it. But the other thing about Ofcom is they do actually fine people as very substantial sums of money, and ultimately they can take away the license. So your whole broadcast company can collapse. So that is the regulatory risk. Of course, on the legal risk side, there is the law of defamation. Law of defamation, wonderfully simple in principle, marvelously complex in its detail. But defamation actions are the most destructive element, or privacy actions, to the newspaper's bottom line. And they are absolutely keen not to be the wrong end of defamation actions because of the cost. Not only the amount they have to pay out to external lawyers, there's the internal time taking out editorial, journalists. The whole thing is a nightmare.
Right.
So the job of the media lawyer is to avoid defamation actions. And while truth is important, they're not so much thinking about that. They're just thinking, do we dare risk this? Is the bottom line going to be affected?
And so if you're coming up to someone who's got a legal team behind them and maybe deeper pockets, their risk is more, basically.
Well, depending on how much the newspapers make. I mean, the Indie doesn't actually have an in-house lawyer. Actually, it didn't when I dealt with it. Well, in the sense of an editorial lawyer, you just deal with the general counsel over there. The other end of the scale, Associated Newspapers has an absolute army of lawyers over there. But their role, it's impossible to exaggerate how important their role and how they are also really respected and integral to the newspaper. I mean, Tom Crone, who used to be the senior lawyer at News UK, used to write articles. So he was that big and that influential.
Fine. So So initially, it's a regulatory risk and a defamation risk, and broadcast is a bit different than the press, than press from a regulation perspective, and frankly has a bit more. You've got to be a bit more. There's better regulation of broadcast media compared to the press, which I think is widely known in the UK, but that's an important thing for PR people to think about.
Yeah.
Just going back to this, I don't know, is it a triumph? I'm not quite sure. You've got your client, you've got your PR firm, you've got your media lawyer. Who's doing what in that scenario, that high pressure scenario when it all kicks off?
Well, it's difficult to give an absolute rule because it depends to some extent on the exact circumstances. As all you guys will know, there are no two PR crises which are the same. If it's something that needs to be done really urgently, really straight away, it really must come down to me. Because one of the first questions that I have to decide is this one to try and stop. And if it is, I need to go straight on in. What I'm ideally doing, though, I'm working alongside with a big PR agency. We're dialoguing together. We're thinking about putting our skills together. And one of the situations is where I can say, look, I can't kill the story off. What I can kill is say, there are 6 parts of the story. I'll say, look, I reckon I can kill off 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. They've got too much evidence to publish. So we'll begin to discuss, Q&A, getting to some extent antidote material out into the system. But the first question is always, firstly, can I kill off the story? And that really is down to me. And secondly, if I can't, how much can I take out of it? How much damage can I reduce?
And that takes us back to risk, right? You're trying to create a perceived risk for the media.
We always go back to risk. Yeah. So a story, 6 elements come through, and what I need to do is attach an individual risk to each one of them. So there's a kind of measure, and then I know the in-house lawyer will look at them and he'll factor in various things. He'll factor in one, how big a story it is for the newspaper. Obviously, they'll take a bigger risk for a bigger story. Secondly, how much money does the client have? So when I'm acting for Amazon or GlaxoSmithKline or whatever, they know we've got pots of money behind us. That's helpful. Thirdly, they will look at now what is the policy of this company? Because if when I'm legaling out a film or TV or whatever, I often look at, because I'm assessing risk, has this company got a record of standing up for its own reputation, taking concrete steps to protect its reputation? If it does have it's known for that, then I'll be more careful. If, however, year in, year out, terrible things are said about the company, don't think about it, I'll think, okay, this is low risk. And the next factor is, who am I up against? Newspapers, I've been dealing with them for 30 years. I know virtually all the in-house lawyers personally. I'm on first name terms with them. I'm a devout Christian, so I'm known as a truth teller. I'm also known as someone who packs a good punch, because I've won pretty well all the cases I've had to bring against newspapers. And on that basis, you put all those factors together, and the in-house lawyer sort of does a kind of sum and says, do you know what, we're going to leave this one alone, or it's the biggest story ever, we'll have to take the risk. As I say, the noted situation's the same. Yeah.
So on their side, there's legal risk, but there's also commercial elements to it as well.
Well, the two are the same then. They both affect the bottom line. I mean, if, for example, a newspaper every other week has to apologise, says we got things wrong, well, what does that do for reader confidence?
Yeah. I guess is it what I was going to ask about the different appetites and risk around the media, is that directly correlated to the regulator, or is there, I suppose, different titles as well?
It is between broadcast newspapers. Independent Press Owners Organisation, much better than nothing, but set up by the press, funded by the press, co-written by the press, the commissioners appointed by the press, it's got a big press bias. Ofcom, much more independent. So hasn't legaled out television programs forever. I know that we take the Ofcom code really seriously. IPSO, not so much. But the second big factor is this: how much money does the paper have? Now, in the case of the Independent, nothing. Essentially, in the case of Associated Newspapers, they're in more money than several medium-sized African countries. They've got money pouring out of their ears. So I need to consider how much appetite for risk that they will have, and finances will depend on it also. Very much it depends on the in-house lawyer. I know most of the in-house lawyers. I know how they think. In one case, I trained them. One of the senior in-house lawyers in Fleet Street was my trainee. So all of these factors go into my consideration as to how to tackle this particular crisis.
Right. When we were talking before, you talked a lot about broadcasts and press and the regulation of those. I had assumed that over the last 10, 15, whatever years, you'd seen an acceleration of cases around crises around social media channels, but you were saying that wasn't really the case, and I was quite surprised by that.
Understandably, Ben, the social media is kind of worth of a podcast in itself. But keeping the key principles as simple as I can. So first of all, the social media is just a platform, okay? And therefore it's just a means of communication. Just the phone is a medium of communication, the laptop's a medium of communication, the television is a medium of communication. So the fundamental issue is still content. Where does the content come from? One. Two, I sent you over some figures. I think that the BBC has 15.5 million Facebook pages. The Sun has 9 million, and so on and so forth. So the breakdown between the traditional media and the social media is disappearing anyway. But I think the third thing to say is that I've been a corporate reputation management lawyer for 30 years. Obviously, for that reason, I've predated the social media. But when we spoke earlier, I could only think of one corporate client who had ever instructed me about a social media post. And the reason for that, I think, were a number of reasons. First of all, it's just a platform. So if it's come from the BBC or it's come from the Times or the Mail, well, we just take on the Times, Mail, or the BBC. They just use this as means of transmission. I think the second thing is that if the person that there will be people who actually don't have a sort of sanity filter and don't think, okay, when they look at social media, where has this come from? And if it's come from someone they have absolutely no idea who they are, or a blogger in a suburb in London who's got no journalist experience or whatever, if they take that material seriously, then they're beyond saving. There's no communication of reason that's going to help them. So why take time? So as I say,
well, I think that might be about half the population of the country. But
well, I actually, Ben, I'm not sure you're right. I mean, okay. I read every survey. I'm a complete glutton for and the surveys I read still tell me, and rightly, that the level of influence starts at the top of the BBC, and generally it's the broadcasters, and rightly so, because of the better regulation, but then go down the newspapers. So leaving aside, I mean, whether they're transmitting their information via Facebook, WhatsApp, X, doesn't matter. People are still, I think, saying, well, is this a trusted source of news? And if it is, then they'll take notice. If it isn't, I think, generally speaking, they won't. Pray God, that's how it is.
So you've done a fair bit of trading around this issue of media law and regulation over the years. Why is it such an important area, do you think, for PR folks? Because it sort of touches on them, but so many of them, it's important, but it's not something they're necessarily dealing with in their day to day. Actually, isn't it?
Well, Ben, I respectfully disagree with you on that. I mean, either they are and they don't know it, or they should be. I mean, the point is, if they're dialoguing with a journalist, most of the time they're not dialoguing with the right person. It's not the journalist who will make the editorial decision. The journalist, if it's contentious, will go straight to the in-house lawyer, who might even be sitting next to him, or he'll shout over the floor, come on, what do I do with it? Or you'll go and see the in-house lawyer. That's where the engine room is of decisions. But I think the other thing is that I was thinking before we spoke, I'm going to guess that there are probably in this country no more than, say, around 50 people who have done editorial work like me. It may be 100, but at most 100, because it's very specialized, very difficult work. I'm telling you, legally out a live television program is not for the faint-hearted. And I've done it, and it's dead scary. Now, the only way you're going to know really how editorial decisions are made is if you make them. And I have made them for 30 years, so I know exactly how they're made. I've trained journalists. I've written a book. So the point is that most of the people, Ben, sorry, in the PR community won't have had that experience, so they won't know that. Yeah. So unless you've been in an editorial cockpit, actually in the hot seat, you don't know how these editorial decisions are made, so you don't know how to affect them.
Yeah, but I suppose the point there is they need to understanding how that ecosystem works. Both within the media organization and within from a crisis PR perspective is really important. And I suppose empathy is a key word there, isn't it? You've got to try and anticipate what the person on the other side may or may not do.
You've got to ideally put yourself in their shoes. And that's always what I do. When I'm drafting up something, I probably know who I'm writing. So it's almost certainly it'll be, dear Jill at The Guardian, dear Pierre at The Times, dear Rachel at The Telegraph, dear Justin at The Sun or whatever. I will know exactly what they're thinking. I know exactly what their criteria are. I know exactly the way they look at things. And I know often, the way they're wired. And I also know about the organization they work for. Now, all of that feeds in to how I approach any particular situation.
Right. And anyone who's listening to this podcast and thinking, that sounds quite interesting, where can they learn a bit more? You mentioned your book. Anywhere else? Yeah. Give your book a plug, obviously.
Listen, the whole reason, Ben, I wrote the book is to teach this stuff, because you're not going to learn it from anywhere else. So inevitably, I will recommend it. Reputation Matters, published by Bloomsbury. The other thing which I do, because I'm almost evangelical about this, is I do a seminar. I've done it to every, big PR companies, big companies. I've done it to
big and small
talent agencies. I've even done it to the entire cast of EastEnders, which was more fun than I can tell you. So what I do in that, in an hour session, I take you through the things that we're talking about now, the key provisions of Ofcom code, the key provisions of independent brands, best out as a code, the key elements of the law, and how to apply them in doing crisis PR.
Brilliant. Jonathan Coad, thank you so much for coming on the show. Fascinating stuff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben, for having me.